Hi, my name is John Reichnether, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Inquisite. Inquisite's an AI-powered platform for biotechs and CROs that accelerates preclinical and clinical development by using AI to streamline workflows and improve collaboration. I'm going to walk you through a brief demo of the platform. Right now, we're in our CRO edition of the platform, and you can see here we've got three modules available to us: a module to assist with proposal development, to assist with trial planning, and our research assistant module. Let's start by walking through our research assistant module. This is designed for both everyday research tasks where you need to quickly search the literature, all the way up to large scale tasks such as building systematic literature reviews. And so we can see here we've got four actions available to us through our research assistant. Let's start with searching papers. This is really built for everyday quick searches where you need to very quickly get a research-backed answer to something or identify the most relevant papers on a particular topic. And let's open a sample query here. We can ask anything we want, and it will use an AI agent to go through, find the most relevant papers and articles for us, review all of those, and then synthesize an answer back to us. And we can see here we've got full transparency in terms of the sources, not only cited for each statement, but also we provide the relevant actual text from the original source. So you can very quickly verify any of the citations that are available in your synthesis. And we can also check the full detail on all the sources that were used here as well. Let's come back to our research assistant and let's take a look at our second action, which is building a literature review. And so this is a more formal process, much more similar to a systematic literature review, and it can dramatically accelerate the process of building out a systematic literature review. So when we kick off one of these, we'll start with a query. It will then prompt us to put in some information to configure the searching process, the screening process, and we'll also be able to select what type of information we would like to extract from each of the papers. It will then go through a process where it will identify a large set of potentially relevant papers, usually a few hundred. It will apply our screening criteria to down select the papers, and then it will extract the requested information from each of the papers. And the end result will look something like this. You'll get a table of all the most relevant papers along with the requested information extracted from each. We can view the full detail of both the search process and of the screening process here. And so we can verify the scoring that was used according to the criteria we set for filtering our papers, and we can also manually override any of the AI filtering that was done. The third action we'll take a look at with our research assistant is analyzing clinical trials. And so we can input any type of query where we might need to search for clinical trial data and perform some analysis. So let's look at a sample one of these. Let's say we have questions such as this: which sponsors have run the largest number of trials for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease? And this will go through and search our own database of clinical trial results. It will then pull the most relevant trials, and it will write some custom code for you to perform a data analysis on the clinical trial data that it's retrieved from our database. And so you can see here, it's pulled the full list of COPD trials. We can scroll through and see the details of each of those here. And then it's done an analysis of this data, and it delivers both a text synthesis and a little visual here for us. And we can see the answer to our question in this particular case was AstraZeneca, as the sponsor has done the largest number of COPD trials. The final action I'll show you in our research assistant is our deep research report. And so this is used when you want to do a much deeper dive into a particular topic. And you can do these on a certain condition, a therapeutic, or even a company. And this will go through a fairly extensive research process. Usually it takes somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes to go through, and it will then build you a full report on whatever you've requested. So let's take a look at sample one of these. This is now an example of what you see with the deep research report. So now we have a full report on our particular query. with plenty of sources cited in the body of the report, and we also have the references down here below. Okay, so now let's come back to our homepage. I'll show you our second module, which is now our proposals module. And so this is really designed for efficiently building RFP responses as well as proposals for grant opportunities. And so let's take a look at how you would go about building an RFP response. You would kick it off, you'd upload the RFP document here, and you have a couple of options to get started on building out the proposal. So you can either create a customized template based on the RFP itself. And so if you select this, Inquisite will go through, scrape all of the text from the RFP, identify the requirements in the proposal, and then build you out a template that's customized to that specific RFP opportunity to use as a starting point for your response. You can also choose to upload an existing template here. So suppose you've got an RFP template that you use with your organization, or you have a previous proposal you've written that you want to use as a starting point for the new proposal. You can just upload that here and use that as the starting point. So let's go through and let's take a look at now the process of building out one of these proposals. So this is a RFP opportunity for a phase 3 osteoarthritis trial here. And we can see here, I'm now in the editing interface. So I've got my template here, which has been built out with all these sections I needed. And this was automatically generated based on this specific RFP opportunity. Each section has a number of subsections, which I need to complete. And I've have prompts here, which have been provided for each of the sections to keep me on task of what I need to include in each section. We also have an AI assistant here, which can help you by brainstorming bullet points of things that you should talk about in a particular subsection. It can help you draft content for a specific section based on sources, for example. It can synthesize source information. And you can also use our research assistant right in the editing interface. So if you wanted to find new sources on a particular topic, you can just put it right in here, and it will then kick off a task with our research assistant to identify relevant sources that you might want to then pull into the response here. And now we can see here we've got several sources identified, and we can choose to pull these in as one of our sources for the proposal. Let's take a look at our dashboard view. So on the dashboard view, we have all the sections of our document. We have a status. You can set deadlines. You can assign ownership to other members of your team. And then on the sources tab here, we maintain our list of references. So we can add in new sources, either from a program workspace, or we can use a research assistant to search for new sources to add in here. And we can also share this with collaborators. So we can add collaborators from our program workspace, or we can add external collaborators to our document as well. Let's now come back to the homepage, and we'll move on to our third module, which is our trial planner. So this is used for the design and optimization of new trial protocols. And so let's take a look at a trial I've been working on here, which is a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma phase 2 trial. We put in some basic information about the trial, and then we can create multiple design scenarios. And so this allows us to do some scenario modeling and analysis where we might build out a few different configurations of the trial with different inclusion-exclusion criteria, for example, or a different choice of endpoint or sample size, and do some modeling around feasibility. This is a scenario I've started working on here. You can see I've got sections to put in the different design decisions. So for example, if I want to work on the study design and the arms, we use our research assistant to pull in all of the relevant previous trial data as a reference point for you to assist with your analysis and decisions around the trial elements. So for example, in this particular section, I have to make decisions on allocation, masking, the interventional model. I can take a look at the information from previous trials for phase 2 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I can see what was used in those trials. So here we can see a view of the allocation approaches used. We can click on the graph, and then we can see all of the relevant trials here for that particular allocation. Or if we want to look at the trials that use parallel assignment, for example, we can quickly do that and take a look at these trials that used parallel assignment approach. Then we can go in and we can make our decisions here. Um, and let's finish these off here, and then we'll save these. Okay. And so let's go back into our scenario. We could do the same thing with our objectives, our endpoints. So we can very quickly do things like view the most commonly used endpoints. So for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, objective response rate is a typical endpoint that's used, and we can, again, view all the trials using that specific endpoint. So this helps us assist with endpoint decisions. We can add our criteria in here as well. And it also supports the statistical design of the trial. So if we open this up here, we can put in some of our basic parameters, power, dropout, our alpha value. We can run a calculation of recommended sample size based on our endpoint, the baseline and treatment effects here. It will use a decision tree to determine the proper statistical test to perform, to calculate a recommended sample size. In this case, it uses a chi-square test based on the expected effect, and recommends a total of 194 patients per group for a total of 388. With the dropout assumption that we've added in of 20%, it recommends 485 total patients here. We can also run a power analysis very quickly as well. So we can see power versus enrollment here. And here's our current enrollment number, 485. We can vary the effect variation and see how our power changes. So if our effect is actually ends up being minus 20% from expected, we can see here that rather than the power of 80%, we're now down at 62%, and we could see that we would need somewhere around 800 participants to be up at 80% power for a lower effect size. So this allows you to very quickly do a sensitivity analysis around sample size here as well. Once we've built multiple scenarios, we've analyzed our different scenarios, we'll select a scenario to use, and then we provide the functionality to very quickly turn that scenario into a draft protocol. So you hit this build protocol button, and it builds a template of the trial protocol itself and pre-populates it with all the information from the scenario design that you've completed in here. So that wraps up our brief tour of the Inquisite platform. We hope that you found that useful, and if you haven't already tried out the platform, we invite you to try it out for yourself at inquisite.ai. Thank you.